예, 빨리 하세요.
예, 됐습니다.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
Hi, this is Peter Hirschberg from Switch, and I am in Seoul with Yongsuk Park and Brad Hardin from Black and Beach, and we've spent the last 3 days meeting with government members and developers. There's a lot of excitement here about renewable energy, about the possibility of a token like Switch accelerating this whole renewables movement. And there's also real interest, Yongsuk, in transforming this economy and making it more maker-like, more renewable. And why so much interest all of a sudden in green energy in Korea?
It is because actually the beginning of the North-South dialogues, and we know that North Korea doesn't have any electricity or nor virtually nothing on renewable energy. Therefore, we may have to provide all the energy from South. Therefore, the interest is skyrocketing at the moment for renewable energy.
I think it's worth pointing out the geopolitical context here. The conversations between President Trump and Kim, and the conversations between Moon and Kim are only like a month or so old.
That's right.
But already here, people are just assuming it's time to start doing economic development with the North. And what we heard today from leaders are that food and energy are the number one priorities.
Mm-hmm.
And what's astounding is, of course, for 60 years, there's been conflict, and now people are almost assuming beyond that and asking, how do we develop?
That's right.
And also this sense that, look, one thing we heard today when we were talking about renewable energy in Seoul is many of the coal plants here are only 20 years old, so throwing them out, not so economic. Mm-hmm. In North Korea, much of the energy is not economic, so what an amazing opportunity to start with something cleaner.
They have a plain land, nothing. Therefore, we do not have to throw away anything or dig up to remove anything. We just build it, simple. So many, not the normal people, but all the businessmen are just looking at North Korea right now, what they do, what they can do, or what kind of government policies will come out. Therefore, this is the moment where we start Swichistocken to be a facilitator.
Brad, you've been out here for DIO, which is a joint venture between Black and Beach and David Brain. You're investing in renewable plants around the world. There was palpable excitement throughout Korea on development, people looking at, can land be used for solar energy? How do they move to a greener future? What's been your sense so far?
I think it's been, to your point, I think it's been met with nothing but excitement. And I think the support that we've received so far, really in talking with the representatives and local governments, it's been phenomenal. And I think there's genuine interest in not only creating development in these cities, in these developing areas, but that they make it smart, right? That they integrate renewable energy, that they have some level of visibility into data. And I think that the appetite and attitude towards technology and some of these tenants and companies coming into their area, it's very exciting. And I think that there's just continued feedback. I don't think we've heard yet someone who is intrinsically opposed to what we've been talking about. It sounds like there's a great opportunity here in Korea.
Right. Nobody was against renewable energy. Some people pointed out that the coal plants hadn't yet been worked out their useful life. Some people pointed out that there might only be 3.5 hours of useful sun a day in a particular location, so they're being realistic about it. The other interesting thing here is that Korea, of course, South Korea has been a big leader in the whole smart cities movement. It was a big leader early on in fast internet. So there's this interesting tight combination between renewables, between cities, between, you and I both wrote books about maker cities, so about citizen engagement and creation, and so that all adds up to kind of a vision about a green, renewable, data-driven future that is almost taken very naturally here. You don't even have to bring up the word, right? People are just thinking that way.
Yeah, it is almost assumed, isn't it? That the shift away from maybe traditional or fossil fuel driven sources is that it's a bit of a shift, right? And we're seeing that happen almost across the board. Obviously there's some economic drivers to this, which will pose some challenges to, massively shifting this over quickly. I don't think it'll happen overnight, but I think that the attitude, I think they're right, and I think it's exciting, and I think that the ability is there. And obviously, from what we've seen today, I think that's validating to support this shift to renewable energy in Korea.
This current Moon's administration is focusing on job creation. That's their most urgent priority. You are doing Maker-City as well as Maker Fairs, Makers Movement, and all this to create jobs. And that's a priority number one here in Korea. And the priority number two is the energy, renewable energy. Because of their suffering from dust and metal and very dirty air pollution from the basically China and also from the coal plants. Therefore, they have to get rid of all these dust in Korean air. And we are bringing exactly the technologies that they require, they need, and this is the right time. And we visited the Ministry of Unification. They are saying that we are the first to suggest an idea on using the DMZ land, and all the ministries that we visited, and the Blue House also welcomed our ideas, both energy initiative as well as smart cities. And the government is allocating several tens of trillion wons to build all new, unexisted, sort of new future cities where you come along with a maker city. Therefore, it is a very good visit, it is very successful, and you can imagine all these people trying to provide you the facilities and measures and solutions for you. They're all here to help.
The proposals that we saw over the last few days, obviously I think, so I may ask you a question, Peter, as our expert in this area, is, when you think about the potential, some of these are, extending into North Korea. And obviously, that's highly politicized right now. But from a smart cities perspective, how would you approach that, or how would you even begin to think about a canvas like that and shifting it to from its current situation to potentially having some level of smart cities involvement and engagement?
Well, talk about a developing economy. Right, I think one place to begin is, we have the developed world and the developing world, and North Korea is the developing world, and yet it's surrounded by its same culture in one of the most developed worlds. So, the only analog we have for this on the planet was East Germany and West Germany. Mm-hmm. But we're also 15 years further into the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So, one thing I see is, I think I've noticed here is, despite 60 years of war and division, because of the recent ties with North Korea, people are almost just assuming away the problems and saying, let's just get started, right? Mm-hmm. Every National Assembly member I've talked to today, and people at the Blue House, when I say, what about the sanctions? They're like, well, that'll get taken care of. Mm. And then the next sentence is, we have to deal with food, and we have to deal with energy. So I think there's some sense that, well, these are our brothers and sisters, and literally probably family members, and if we can get past this stuff, there's the rail line, we can work with them on food, we can send energy up through that line. In terms of how North Korea can develop, I mean, first of all, there's this very interesting possibility that it doesn't have to be traditional expensive or traditional dirty energy, it can be clean. We know from the climate accords that a fundamental division was the cost of renewable energy in the global south, which was not developed, and then the west and the north had developed, and so India would say, you've had a 150-year head start, can't we do our coal? Mm. Maybe we can get beyond that in this unification, right? Maybe one can actually use renewables and the new plant can be less. And this is where incentives come in and pricing comes in. The other interesting thing is we've all written about Maker City. Well, Maker movement is about very local. It's about skilling people up. It's about starting with young people very early on. So there's going to need to be a real introduction of the notion of production, of capitalism, of what you can create, how you can trade, how do you use new forms of technology, right? Because this is a population that's heard nothing for many years, right? So I think that there are pointers from development economics that can be used with North Korea that are unique, that look different from Germany because we're, some number of years on, and the technologies are different. So as many problems as it presents, there's a lot of will here in South Korea to go work on it.
Mm-hmm. It strikes me too. I think one of the things that we've seen, moving beyond current politics and others, but you think about this energy globally, and I think now for the first time we're seeing technology be able to support data sets on a global scale. That's quite exciting when you think about it. You begin to think about where is energy needed, where is clean energy needed, and you think about the Switch platform, course, which we've helped develop as Black and Veatch in regards to the work we did with Atonics and a lot of the artificial intelligence and the algorithms that we use to build that oracle. So obviously we're big supporters of that. I think when we begin to think about this, the world starts to get a little smaller, doesn't it? When you think about data and the transparency related to that and unifying and rallying around that, I think that actually it's pretty interesting to begin to get that visibility and then take action on it.
That's right. Could you explain to Koreans about the God parity and when all the prices go down, and Switch will be the sort of only solution we have left?
Yeah, I don't know about the only solution. I think what we'll have, though, is, with the material prices continuing to fall, just as, in the U.S. we have big box retailers and, 8-9 years ago, an LED or an LCD TV even would have cost you maybe $7,000, and now you can go and buy that same product, even, of course, it's advanced, it's better, and now it's available for $600. Mm-hmm. Right, so we see the same thing in material pricing as it relates to, materials for solar energy projects. Mm-hmm. So as solar energy materials continue to become less, right, as well as the technology of those continue to advance, at some point you're going to need additional economic drivers that make it so it is further incentivized to continue to use it, right? And I think that that's going to be a key component of the future development of renewable energy, particularly in areas where it's close to where this equipment is manufactured, and that it's going to need that additional incentive, which I think Switch fits the bill really well for, to create that additional economic driver to further deliver solar energy and continue on to make sure it's made available and it's economically viable. It's quite exciting.
Young-suk, we live in an Internet of Things world. We have sensors everywhere. As renewable energy is produced, it's possible now to capture the moment it's produced and where it's produced, and then understand where that's being produced. Is that reducing the use of fossil fuel? It's also possible to take all of that data and then use it to predict where's the next place that if you made an investment, you'd have a better return or you'd reduce the use you'd reduce carbon. So that's where Switch comes in. At the moment, there's not a global market for this. And even though if you produce energy, you store the data, it's often shared monthly or maybe manually with utility. The possibility here is if you incent the sharing of data into, if you will, kind of a piece of global intelligence, and then you also incent the sharing of predictions so people can model out what's the right kind of incentive, then you can start awarding an incentive that actually makes renewables more valuable and reduces carbon. That's the vision of Switch. And we've seen this here in Korea. We've seen a huge interest in putting in renewables and an absolute complete interest in having every site share data, including the data on fossil fuels, because once you have that and you can do predictions, there's just much less risk about where do you put the next asset. Or, for example, if a community has solar in a few places, what's the value of adding that battery? So when you think about, well, where does blockchain fit in with energy? It's two big areas. It's on peer-to-peer production where you can actually trade among people with solar. And then it's kind of more globally, creating a market, sharing data, and using that to drive capital. That's the exciting thing. And it's right at this moment when you can see, as in places like South Korea, there's an interest in doing that. The other interesting point is something's missing in the marketplace. There's nothing more global than CO2. It goes everywhere, right? Shows up in everybody's backyard. But these energy markets and incentives are incredibly local. I mean, for example, there might be an incentive in California to put in solar, but it turns out if you sited a solar facility in Jamaica or in somewhere in the U.S. where there was coal, or in Africa, you'd reduce 7 times more carbon. 7 times more carbon, but there's no way of doing that now. It's a lost opportunity. Seizing that opportunity is what creates a global market. So Switch is both an economic mechanism and a movement. Tim Draper said that blockchain is really about, and coins are really about creating a movement for social change. And as you pointed out, we're in this transition from an extractive economy to a more renewable one, to more maker production, and here is Switch and renewable sitting in the middle of it.
Thank you very much. I think we've covered all aspects.
Yeah, thank you, Young Suk, for being a great host here in South Korea. And
thank you very much for coming. You have to come back again. Again and again and again, I think.
Well,
we
look,
need you.
there's a lot of sensors to deploy. There's a lot of cities to make smart. And clearly, this Korean peninsula is on the march. So there's going to be a lot to watch here.
Excitement is here, and everybody is now watching us. And this is the best place to sort of start the Switch movement because it's focused on the media. Focus of media.
Well, it's true. We should point out that Switch launched just this month in June. And already in Europe, there are about 3.5 gigawatts operating with Switch through a partner called E2M, which is in Austria and Germany. This is hydro, solar, geothermal. In the United States, Lend-Lease is deploying it because the existing mechanism of credits and RECs, the existing way to account for it is manual. So they're automating it. And of course, Black & Veatch, where are you deploying Switch?
yeah, so I think as we look to deploy the renewables projects that we're now developing, and we've recently launched Diode, we are looking to deploy Switch on those projects. And I think it's one of those things that, being a good partner, and obviously Switch relying on Black & Veatch to deliver those early services and to build the algorithms that support it. Obviously, we want to be reciprocal in that relationship.
So we
And
have a stage one platform already working. So
Stage 1 is working. And look, the world is on the march towards renewables, towards sustainability. And the other interesting thing is this is highly distributed. It's cities, it's lots of national governments. This is global. So let's get it done.